Good morning, my dear friends and my dear students. Today we are going to talk about state and society in medieval India. When you talk about the medieval India, it is from Cholas to the Mughals. There is a lot of changes of the administration. There was a lot of reformation or the changes in the society. We talk about the polity. And there was a lot of changes in various activities. Yes, my dear friends, that's what we are going to learn in today's session. State and society in medieval age. History, Unit 7. We are going to talk about, in this lesson, a successive dynamic changes and the results of political outcome from the time of Cholas to the Mughals. And we are also going to talk about the second one, the influence of Islam and the Islamic state, emerging of Islamic states in India and the social cultural life of the people, whether it was affected or it was a challenging or was it improving the social life of the people. The third one we are going to talk about the institution, the birth and the administrative changes during all these empire rule, during the power of Mughals, Cholas, Pandyas and Vijayanagar period. And when we see all these type of administration, all these groups of changes in all these aspects, what are the development in literature, in art and in architecture. So we are going to see the development of these three areas, that is art, architecture and the literature. And not only this, the basic activities of us is the agriculture, the primary activity, and not only the primary activities, how it is being transformed and how it is being shifted to various other activities like a textile and various other manufacturing sectors. So that's what we are going to see in this lesson. And the last of the topic of the state and the society is the progress of the seafaring, the trade through the water bodies and the commerce and urbanization of the people of this particular time, that is the medieval age. To start with, we will proceed the first topic. What is the medieval period? When you talk about medieval period, it is from the 7th century AD till the beginning of the Mughal rule in the 16th century. So 7th century to the 16th century is a time duration which is called as the medieval period. After the medieval period, it is called as the modern period. It is also referred to the Mughals era. It is from the 16th century to the 18th century. So now here we are going to talk about the medieval period, medieval age, medieval period. After this is the modern. So modern is from the Mughals to the 18th century. When you talk about this political scenario, the area of the aspect of political, in all parts of India underwent various changes, definitive changes which transform the social, economical fabric and the development of the whole of the country. So that's what here we are going to talk about. When you see the political changes, political means the rule of a particular king's, particular dynasty, particular clan. So the first one, the major political changes. It started with the expansion of the Chola Empire. The Chola Empire started with the time of Rajaraja I who the Pandya and the Pallava kingdoms extending north till Odisha. So the Chola Empire, they started from the Pandyas and Pallava kingdoms from the north till Odisha. From the 12th century onwards, the beginning of several centuries of Muslim rule in Delhi. So in the North India was occupied by the Muslim rulers, and their rule they started from Delhi and extending throughout North India, and the spread of Islam to different parts of the country. First from Delhi it started to spread different parts of our country. But by the end of 13th century, the eclipse of the great empire of the Cholas and the conquest rise of many religious kingdoms in South India. So at the beginning of 13th century, there emerged so many other kingdoms, empire in the southern kingdom. This ultimately ended in the rise of Vijayanagar Empire. When we talk about Vijayanagar Empire, it is exercised authority. It is a practiced authority over all of the South India, and came to be considered the bastion of religious rule in South India. Vijayanagar, when you talk about it, is a Hindu type of rule, whereas the Mughals are the Islamic rule. Consolidation of Muslims rule under the Mughals in the north beginning in the year 1526 AD with the defeat of Ibrahim Lodi by Babur. So Babur came and defeated Ibrahim Lodi in the year 1526. From then on, this Muslim rule, that is under the Mughals power, came to be. And its height, the Mughal Empire stretched from the Kabul to Gujarat to Bengal, from Kashmir to the South India. So when you talk about Kabul to Gujarat, so when you talk about Kabul, that is to Gujarat to Bengal. So Gujarat in the west to the east, when you talk about, we talk about Bengal. At the same time Kashmir, north from Kashmir to the South India. So they expanded their territory, their empire, and vast. And at this time there was a coming of various Europeans in 17th. So when you talk about the 18th century, this coming of Europeans beginning with the Portuguese who arrived on the west coast of India in the year 1498. First they arrived, they did not start with, but they started their power later in the 18th century, how they started to conquer. So this is what we are going to talk about, different political changes. So just to summarize, what are the political changes we have talked about? We started with the Chola Empire, which is Rajaraja I extended the one. The second one we talked about the Muslim rule, the spread of Islam, and in the south we talked about the Vijayanagar Empire, and we also talked about the Islamic rule of Mughals who came, okay, with the arrival of Babur, conquest of Babur, okay, how they expanded. Next one, the arrival of Europeans in 1498, how they started to enter into India, in the southern India, and they start to develop their own ideas. The first one, when you talk about political changes between the year 1000 AD to 1700 AD. So here we are going to talk about some of the various particular topics like advent of Islam, how the Islamic rule or the power came to India. The second one we are going to talk about the Chola Empire. When you talk about Chola Empire, we should remember Pandyas and Pallavas, who are like corresponding at the same time they were existing, and they were trying to fight against each other and expand their territory. The third one is the Vijayanagar Empire, very important one in the southern India. And the fourth one is the Mughal with the arrival of Babur. And the last one is the arrival of the Europeans with the Portuguese, arrival of the Portuguese in South India. So these are the major topics now we are going to deal with. To start with the first one, the advent of Islam in North India. So they arrived from different parts of the world and they have entered into the northern part of India. To say, Muslim rule was established in Delhi at the end of 12th century. It was by Muhammad Ghori. He is an Arab Muslim, a merchant who had been trading in the ports of the west coast. Especially he was having a trade with a particular part in Kerala as early as 9th century. At the same time, similarly, Muslim invaders started to conquer, from the West Asia, had set up by sultanates in Gujarat and Sindh since in the 8th century. So here we are talking about only 12th century, but it was started having trade with them, conquering various ideas in the 8th century itself. The impact of the Muslim rule was felt. When they started to enter into India, they did not feel very much of their own impact, but they felt the impact during the reign of Alauddin Khilji in the year 1296 to 1316 AD. He sent military campaigns to the south. The primary motive or objective was to plunder the wealth rather than to expand his territory. So he did not think of expanding his territory, but he thought there was a lot of wealth in the southern part of India. So wants to take away the wealth. So that's why he sent. Another one is the important place, the Devagiri. Devagiri is near Aurangzebad. He was captured by Alauddin Khilji and later he renamed it as the Daulatabad. It was a second stronghold. It was a second well-to-do place of his growing kingdom of Alauddin Khilji. So Alauddin Khilji and his slave commander, that is Malik Kafur. So he was captured, so he was a slave and he was made as a commander. So Malik Kafur, he was sent to the military expedition further to the south and the first decade of 1300 AD. So at this time, so Alauddin Khilji sends his slave or the commander Malik Kafur to the southern part to plunder the wealth. Not actually we know it, they did not mean to capture, they want to plunder the resources. So that is the major reason he sent. At the same time, the Tughlaq kings who came after Alauddin also sent their armies to the south. So they did not stop with the north, they sent their commander, they sent their slave to the south. As a result, when Tughlaq king sent, generally more isolated southern part of the country came into the orbit, boundary of the rulers of the north. So far, the North Indian rulers only occupied or conquered only the northern part of India. Now, for plundering the wealth, they started to conquer the southern part. So it started to expand more and more. The governors were appointed in the various provinces in the Deccan region. We know it, the southern part of so-called India is called as the Deccan region. So starting from Gujarat, from Bengal, so this region is called as the Deccan region. So in this particular Deccan region, and the Sultanate was even established in Madurai. So Sultanates not only conquered in the northern part, but they have expanded to the southern part, even to Madurai they started to. So during the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, there was a revolt in Daulatabad. So Alauddin Bahman Shah was set up a Bahmani Sultanate in 1347 AD with its capital as Bidar. Then development of Bahmani kingdom survived for nearly a century and a half, mainly due to the able administrative of Muhammad Gawan. So Muhammad Gawan is very, very important person when we talk about this Bahmani kingdom. A great statesman and the loyal ministers emerged, and after his death, many viceroys declared their independence. So many of them were administering particular provinces. So they are called as the viceroys. These viceroys slowly started to make their province as the independent one. And by the end of the 15th century, 5 sultanates came up in the Deccan. So the 5 sultanates are Vijaypur, Golconda, Ahmednagar, Berar and Bidar. So these are the 5 sultanates who came up, who made themselves as the independent one. So among these, the Vijaypur and Golconda were the largest of these sultanates, and the region entered a phase of a considerable economic growth and the expansion of trade with the various other countries. These Deccan sultanates who were not only the northern part, who came to the southern part, they are known as the Deccan Sultanate. So these Deccan Sultanates were conquered by Aurangzeb in the year 1600 AD and other year 1600 plus. And the entire region as far as the southern Madras, okay, so that is Chennai, became a part of Mughal Empire. So we know it, Babur came and conquered only the northern part of India. But when it came to Aurangzeb, he not only conquered all the northern part from here, Gujarat to, we talk about Bengal, he came even up to southern part, Deccan kingdom, even to Chennai. So he conquered all these places, and at this time it was the great highest zenith of these Mughals. So when you talk about this, when you summarize the first part of this, the advent of Islam, so started with the smaller arrival of some of the Islamic rulers in the northern part, one after the other conquered the whole of India. Okay, here and there we can talk about small kings, small empires were existing, but most part were conquered by this particular Islamic rule. So in between that we are going to talk about the Chola Empire. So when you remember a Chola Empire, okay, how it developed. So it already we know it, Chola Empire which began under Rajaraja I, and the Pallava kingdom had already been assimilated into the Chola kingdom. Assimilate means they were one along with, they were little bit of united, okay, supporting each other. The Pandya kingdom, they remained independent, means they were separate. So these Pallavas and Cholas, they were united, they are trying to rule the kingdoms, whereas the Pandyas, they were nearly they were so-called the independent one, they were separate. But they were lesser than the Cholas. Sometimes we can talk about dependent, so they are not full powerful, so less than, okay, these Cholas. So Pandyas are not so powerful as Cholas. The empire expanded of these Cholas further under the Rajendra I, who had successfully taken his armies as far as to the northeast as Giver Ganga. So he started from the southern part, Cholas, so he expanded to till the northern part. We talk about it is the river Ganges. Ganges we know it, so it is parallel to the Nepal. So till then he started to conquer. So that was the greatness of Cholas. So Rajendra I also sent a naval expedition against various places like Sailendra kingdom of Sri Vijaya, that is the Indonesia, Kadaram, that is Kedah, and the Shillong, in the southern part we have Shillong. So these are the three regions. He also had the naval expedition, conquering of kingdom, and that's why this expedition of conquering these three places, for example, that is Sailendra kingdom, and then Sri Vijaya, and then Kadaram and the Shillong. So these are the major kingdoms of the Shailendra kingdom, when he conquered, he attained. Okay, these gave him a title for Rajendra I, gave him a title. Okay, who had conquered the Ganges and the Kadaram. So when you say it is known as Gangayum Kadaramum Konda Cholan. So this was the title given to him for this great so-called naval expedition. And later Ceylon remained a province of Chola's empire for so many few decades. So this was the greatness of these Cholas. The empire, which was considered to be so many other empires also were given in the marriage with the Eastern Chalukyas. So they had a marriage alliance with the various like a Chalukyas and Rajendra's grandson, that is a Klotunga one. He extended up to the border of Odisha, so he also expanded his own kingdom and territory. And when we talk about these particular Cholas, we talk about the maritime trade. Maritime trade is when we talk about a seafaring or a naval, okay, the trade that is through water body. With the Southeast Asia and to China expand greatly during the particular Chola period. So during the Chola period, through these water bodies, they had a trade with China and the Southeast Asia. It did not stop with that. It also continued the interaction with the Tamil merchant, results in the spread of influence of Indic culture, Indian culture and the art into Southeast Asia. So when you talk about the Asian part, the northern part of India to the southeast part, okay, they started to expand their own culture, art and various other aspects. That we can be seen in the magnificent temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia. So it is the influence of art and architecture and various aspects, how it has influenced the Southeast Asia is seen through this particular. So we are having an example for it. To start with the third one, the Vijayanagar Empire. In 7th standard and 8th standard, we might have learnt about this particular Vijayanagar Empire, which is a vast topic. But in short, to have a little bit knowledge about it, let's have this particular session. The Chola Empire, who were ruling, just we talked about, this particular Chola Empire began to decline after the middle of the 13th century. The last known Chola Empire was Rajendra III. So the empire died out of in the year 1279 AD because of the several power centers came up after this in the region. And further in the south, the Pandya kings again sought to regain the glory and what they had lost under the Cholas. So we talked about Pallavas and Cholas. They were united, they were ruling together, whereas Pandyas were independent. And they lost some of the kingdoms of the region under the Cholas. So now they are getting, strengthening their army and power to get back those last region from these Cholas. So that was the major decline of the Chola Empire. So this Chola Empire, the decline gave way for the various other rulers, the kings. So many brilliant Pandya kings like Jatavarman Sundara Pandyan, who ruled at the end of the 13th century, and he developed from the north was Hoysala kingdom with its capital at Belur and later Halebedu. So he shifted the capital from Belur to the Halebedu. This kingdom, this particular empire kingdom extended through much of the present day, which is called as Karnataka. So there was a lot of changes by this particular Pandya king, that is the Jatavarman Sundara Pandyan. And later the Kakatiyas started to rule from Warangal, that is today's Telangana, while Yadavas ruled in the Devagiri, that is Devagiri fell under the Alauddin Khilji's force at the end of 13th century. So all this took place. Okay, the Kakatiya's rule and the Yadavas rule, which was followed under the Alauddin Khilji's rule. So these all took place in the 13th century. These states, like we talk about Telangana, when you talk about the Devagiri, this place did not exist peaceful cooperation. There was no peace, and the region was very often affected by various other internal wars and the conflicts. So between the kings or within the territory there was a lot of conflicts and the problems, and there emerged a lot of wars, so that states were not at peace. The establishment of the kingdom, when I talk about various other, mainly of Vijayanagar, was a most very important development in the history of South India. Because when you talk about the northern part, which was conquered much of the Islamic rule, now the Vijayanagar Empire, which was very much developed by the Muslims' rule. The kingdom was established by Harihara and Bukka, their two brothers. They established this particular kingdom. They were the first rulers of this Sangam dynasty. So when you talk about Sangama dynasty, they were the first one to develop. They founded a new capital city on the southern bank of Tungabhadra, which they named afterwards the Vijayanagara, the city of victory. So Harihara, who was crowned in the year 1336, so who was Sangama dynasty, ruled Vijayanagar for nearly 1.5 century. So he ruled for a long term, and this was followed by Saluva dynasty, which was in power only for a brief period, a short time. Then later the Tuluva dynasty, so we talked about Sangama dynasty, then we also talk about the Saluva dynasty. The third one is the Tuluva dynasty, who also succeeded as the rulers. And Krishna Devaraya, who was the important one, a greatest ruler of the Vijayanagar, belonged to this particular Tuluva dynasty family. So these are how this Vijayanagar Empire, development of these various dynasties started to rule. As the empire expanded, the kingdoms to the south, as is the Hoysalas and the Tamil region, were also assimilated into the Vijayanagar. So not only these, when you talk about various dynasties, along with these particular Hoysala kingdoms and the Tamil region, all these joined together. So that's later we talk about they all become a Deccan dynasties, as well as the religious based kingdom of Kondaividu and Odisha. So these are the major places which came under this particular empire, Vijayanagar Empire. And finally, the combined force of the 5 Deccani Sultanates, the 5 major Sultanates region, which are defeated by Vijayanagar in the year 1565 AD at Battle of Talikota. Very important battle when you talk about in the southern kingdom. The Vijayanagar empires, then they shifted the capital further to the south to Penugunda. Eventually we call it as a Chandragiri near Tirupati. The empire, the whole of empire of this Vijayanagar finally withdrew away from the middle of the 17th century. The so powerful Vijayanagar empire slowly started to fade away, started to wither, from various places and started decline their own kingdom. So this is how the decline of Vijayanagar empire came to be. Are very, very important. Already we talked about the advent of Europeans. With the advent of Europeans, we talk about the arrival of, the Mughals, very important people. It is also another aspect of them. So very major place, it is also another lesson in the 7th standard. So we are going to see in a short list. The Mughal Empire, which was founded by Babur in the year 1526. So when you talk about the Mughals, starting with the 1526 AD. So it starts with the 1526 AD, and it develops from then on with the arrival of Babur into India. And he defeated Ibrahim Lodi at the Panipat, the great battle of Panipat. So from then he started to conquer. The first 6 Mughal emperors are referred as the great Mughals because they were the one who started to expand, who started to bring these particular Mughals rule in India and how they developed. And the last was Aurangzeb. And we know it, Aurangzeb, in the eyes of Aurangzeb, everything started. And we talked about Aurangzeb was the one who started to expand from the north to south. So the Mughals rule expands. So all these great 6 emperors are called as the great Mughals. Akbar consolidated the Mughals empire through the conquest and through the policy of consultation with the religious based kingdoms of Rajasthan. So Babur, he was a little bit of flexible with the people. So he did not follow it very strictly of Islamic rule when he had a conquer in Rajasthan, various other places. The Mughal Empire, though began in the disintegrator after Aurangzeb, continued to exist nominally till 1857. So when you talk about till 1857, so this was the extension of the Mughal rule. So what happened? In between, with the death of Aurangzeb, so who was called as the last great Mughal, with that everything came to an end. A new power center rose in this particular Maharashtra in the 17th century. And as the Marathas under the leadership of Shivaji, who was seriously undermined the authority of the Mughals in the western part of India. At its height, the empire, the Mughal empire, stretched over most of the Indian subcontinent. Only the southwestern region like Kerala and the southern Tamil Nadu were not directly under the Mughal rule. They were sent through the various like a commander, like a provinces they were ruled by, but where they were not under the rule of the Mughals directly. So indirectly they were ruled by the Mughals. But the Mughals rule was extended till here. And the last group of the people came to be in the India was the Europeans. Arrival of Europeans, we know it. It is a huge topic, starting with the Portuguese, Dutch, Danish, and all the British. They are called as the English people. So all these great people came to be. So started with the arrival of Portuguese. Already we know it. During the 15th century, the Europeans were very much preoccupied with trying to find a direction, a sea route to India, because they know it, there is a lot of spicy goods are available in India. So they were trying to find various sea routes to coming to India. Bypassing and the overland route through West Asia. So when you talk about India and the western part of it, so the Arab countries, so through that they are trying to come through the landmark. So that was the first time. And the Mediterranean Sea. So these are the major routes they had it. The spicy trade from India was controlled by Muslims up to Alexandria. So it was completely controlled by the Muslims. By gaining the direct access to India, the Europeans could exercise more direct control, full control over the spice trade, and they obtained a spice at more favorable price, because it was very easy for them to get lot of goods from India and they could export to or take to their own countries and sell. So in the year 1498, so when you talk about these Europeans, 1498 is the important time when Vasco da Gama landed on the Kerala coast, having sailed around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. Barely 5 years later, the Portuguese, when you talk about, the Portuguese built their first fort at Cochin in the year 1503. Goa was captured in the year 1510 and became the center of the Portuguese state in India. So Portuguese came and they started to conquer in the Goan region and they had their first place. And later these Portuguese, they were able to conquer many ports of East Africa up to the Malacca, and they could effectively control the maritime trade over the entire region of this particular, the western part. The European nations, they followed the Portuguese. So once the Portuguese arrived and they found the route, most of the other Europeans started to come. For example, the Dutch, the English and the French are the major. The major activities of them was carried through the respective East Indian companies. So they established the East Indian Company. Through the East Indian Company, they started to have their own trade and various aspects. In South India, however, the political authority, we know it, they have started with the trade, and later on that trade became a political conquest. So the political authority was fragmented and much less cohesive, and they had their own enclaves over which they exercised completely authority. The Dutch in the Pulicat, later which is called as the Nagapatnam, the English, the British, they started to have the headquarters in Madras, French in Pondicherry. So these are another one of the dens, that is the Trancobar. So these are the places they started to expand their own territory. Started with the headquarters, they established the East Indian Company and they had a trade. Yes, my dear friends, so these are the political changes. The arrival of these people, the arrival of the advent of Islam, the Chola Empire rule, the Vijayanagara Empire birth and the decline, and that decline of Vijayanagar started with the arrival of Mughals, and during the rule of Mughals we talk about the arrival of Europeans into India. So all these are changes brought by the politics in India. So these are the major topics we can talk about. Because of these rule, by these political changes, there is a particular impact in the rule and the polity. So next one we are going to talk about the impact on the polity. Okay, we will continue about these topics in the next session. Till then, let's revise and follow the topic. Thank you.